welcome to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for October 10th, 2022. We have two council members who are remote tonight, Councilmember Barksdale and Councilmember Zahn, but they are with us at the meeting. Therefore, we still have a quorum, even though you can only see two of us at the dais. City Clerk, would you like to do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Robinson.
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
I'm here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes, I believe will be joining us shortly. And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
Since Councilmember Stokes is not here, I will lead us in the flag salute.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Could you go ahead and lead us in the flag salute?
I'm way down here, but yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have three proclamations tonight. The first one is Walk and Bike to School Day, which is going to be read by Councilmember Robertson. And I understand we have some students and their families in the room tonight. Can you raise your hand so we can see you and support? Great, thank you for being here. We can do a picture when we're done. Go ahead, Councilmember Robertson.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Whereas all children benefit when communities take steps to make the safety of people walking and rolling a priority. And whereas physical activity and getting outdoors through activities such as walking or rolling to school can play a leading role in improving the health and well-being of children. And whereas an important role for parents and caregivers is to teach children about the safety when walking and rolling and the health benefits related to physical activity. And whereas Walk and Roll to School Day in October has proven to be helpful in encouraging children to safely walk or roll to school or to the school bus, and in creating and promoting safe, local, safe routes to school programs across the United States and globally. And whereas walking or rolling as modes of transportation can relieve traffic congestion and offer environmental benefits. And whereas this year's Walk and Roll event is coordinated by Bellevue School Pool, a collaboration between Bellevue, King County Metro, and Bellevue School District to encourage families and students to explore sustainable transportation options. Now, therefore, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim October 12th, 2022 as Bellevue School Pool Walk and Roll to School Day, and encourage everyone to consider the safety and health of children traveling to and from school today and every day. Signed, Lynn Robinson.
Great, let's do a photo op. The next proclamation is for Indigenous Peoples Day, and Councilmember Lee, would you like to read that, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas indigenous people have lived in the Puget Sound region for time immemorial, and whereas as a community we acknowledge the land we are on as the ancestral homeland of the coastal Salish people, the traditional home of all tribes and bands, including the Duwamish, Susquamish tribe, Muckleshoot Indian tribe, and Snoqualmie Indian tribe. And whereas Native communities and tribal nations throughout our country have endured centuries of displacement from these lands, assimilation, violence, and terror. And whereas we take the opportunity to express our deepest respect to the original caretakers of this land, who continue to live here, preserve, persevere, and honor their heritage. And whereas indigenous people have made and continue to make significant contributions to the region through science, technology, literature, and environment, the arts, and more. And whereas though the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately harmed the health and livelihoods of indigenous people, Native communities have been instrumental in connecting people with vaccination resources and information, boasting some of the highest vaccination rates of any racial or ethnic group. And whereas the City of Bellevue is committed to upholding the values of access, equity, inclusion, and opportunities for local and regional Native Americans, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and all indigenous communities. Now, therefore, on behalf of Lynn Robertson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of the City Council, we do hereby proclaim October 10th, 2022 as Indigenous Peoples' Day in Bellevue, and urge all residents to reflect on history, contributions, and resilience of Indigenous people to the benefit of our communities. The city further reaffirms its ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as it strives to effectively serve everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last one is Chinese Information and Service Center 50-year anniversary proclamation, and I think we have Executive Director Michael Eady accepting today. So I'll go ahead and read this, and then if you have something you want to say after, we'll have you do that, and we'll do a photo. Whereas the Chinese Information and Service Center is commemorating 50 years serving communities throughout the Puget Sound region, including Bellevue, and whereas in 1972, University of Washington students and local youth saw elders in Chinatown unable to access public services and took action to improve their quality of life. 5 decades later, and with tremendous support from the community, the CISC organization is now serving thousands of immigrants and their family members throughout King County annually. And whereas CISC's team of bilingual staff provides linguistically and culturally appropriate programs and services for immigrant families, youth, and older adults in Chinese, Russian, Vietnamese, and Spanish, and at community-based sites such as the North Bellevue Community Center and the Crossroads Shopping Center. And whereas during the pandemic, the CISC worked alongside various partners, such as the city, to ensure equitable access to vaccines, respond to the rise in anti-Asian hate, and adapt programs to continue serving the community effectively and safely. And whereas since 2015, Bellevue's communities of color make up more than half the city's population, and Bellevue's long-term vision of welcoming the world and seeing our diversity as our strength reflects the appreciation we have for critical support organizations such as CISC. And whereas on October 15th, 2022, the CISC will bring community members together for an anniversary friendship gala in our community at the Westin Bellevue. Now, therefore, I, Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim October 15th, 2022 as Chinese Information and Service Center's 50th anniversary, and invoke the community to join us in celebrating their anniversary and thanking them for their many decades of assisting community members and fostering a welcoming, inclusive environment in Bellevue and our region. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson and members of the City Council. My name is Michael Itty. I'm Executive Director of CISC, and it's such an honor to be here. Thank you for recognizing CISC's 50th anniversary. It's amazing to think 50 years ago in 1972, there were college students from UW and youth walking around and seeing the need. And now we're here 5 decades later, serving more than 15,000 immigrants and their family members throughout King County. And in the city of Bellevue, we're grateful for the resources and the spaces to provide those services. I mean, North Bellevue Community Center is a great location that has so many wonderful programs, and it's a joy to be there and to see how we're serving older adults and providing a space for them to connect socially as well as improving their health and well-being. And to know that throughout King County, our staff of 130 team members who are speaking multiple languages you mentioned. We have preschool programs, after school, helping people gain English skills, becoming a U.S. citizen, serving thousands of older adults to help them thrive in their own homes through caregivers and other kinds of specialists. And we're also working on connecting people to healthcare information to make sure they have access to all the various programs that help improve and strengthen their quality of life. So thank you again for that recognition. We're grateful to be able to bring the community together on Saturday. I know that some people will be here on that weekend, and we're just grateful to have that opportunity.
Great, thank you. All right, now we'll do a photo op. Make sure I got the right one.
The musical chairs.
I know. Okay. Next, we have the agenda. Do I have motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I assume that was an aye from Jeremy as well? Okay, thanks. All right, City Clerk, welcome back. Do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
We have 5 speakers this evening, Mayor, and before I start calling the names, I'll let everyone know that oral communications is for a period of no more than 30 minutes. And each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and we only allow 1 speaker or 3 speakers per side of any one particular topic. And with that, I will call our first speaker, who I believe is joining us virtually, and that's Liz Walsh. Ms. Walsh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Your time begins now.
Thank you so much. As noted, my name is Liz Walsh. I've lived in Northeast Bellevue for 12 years, and I'm a member of the 2018 class of Bellevue Essentials. The City of Bellevue should create more incentives to protect and retain existing significant and landmark trees and make it more difficult to remove them. Trees are obviously beautiful to look at, but they're also essential for iconic native species like bald eagles. They provide unparalleled cooling in a warming world and improve air quality more than almost any other measure. The last few years have seen record-setting terrible air quality. It's something that we all have been suffering through the last few weeks here right in Bellevue, and all climate models point to that becoming more common. We in Bellevue must all do our parts to meet the moment alongside our neighboring communities, some of which have already implemented stronger protections for their trees. If development trends continue, Bellevue's substantial efforts to achieve the city's goals of 40% canopy coverage, which I think is currently around 37%, will not be able to keep up with the pace of tree removal. Planting replacement trees is not a sufficient strategy because it can take 45 to 150 years for significant and landmark trees to grow, and we can't replace our way out of those losses. Raising the costs of removing significant and landmark trees in Bellevue, along with providing direct incentives to retain them, will drive the desired outcomes with developers and landowners. In other words, Bellevue should make it the easiest thing in the world to not cut down a tree. In conclusion, I ask the City Council to please continue looking for ways to protect the longest living residents of Bellevue and to support measures like those carefully developed by Trees for Livability. Thank you to the Bellevue City Council for taking the time to hear from me on a topic that matters a lot to me. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. The next speaker on the list is Simon Pryor, who I believe is joining us in person.
Thank you. My name is Simon Pryor, and I too, like Liz, would like to speak about the trees and a view that there really is a need to update codes to support and enforce things that are done to trees going forwards. So I've lived in the US for maybe 25 years. I grew up in the UK. In my early youth, I experienced that many of the cities in which I lived had been developed maybe tens or hundreds of years ago. And trees had been removed from those domestic properties in a way that would never come back. So when I moved to Bellevue, which was only some 12 or so years ago, I found it quite amazing that fairly modest residential communities still had substantial trees that had been there for 50, 100, or even longer years. And I found that really attractive, and I think that's a real strength of the Bellevue community. To my dismay, maybe a year or two ago, I had a new neighbour. And this neighbour, also on his property, had some 20, 30 trees like mine, which are between 50 or maybe 150 years old, on not a substantial property. And my dismay was that that neighbour elected to remove many of those trees. One of those was done without a permit. Some of those were done on land that was protective native growth. And our ability to raise this as a concern, to have some mechanism available to report this, and to have it enforced that that was not necessarily allowable, was something that caused some upset. So I'm a strong advocate of making sure that we have something in place to improve the rules that are there to prevent the removal of trees, and also to enforce the rules, whether they exist or whether they are amended in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. The next speaker on our list is Barb Williams, who's also in person.
Well, good evening, you all. I'm Barb Williams. I've been a resident of Bellevue for 38 years, and I'm an educator. So I'm coming at this topic as an educator. Just to let you know, I have taught at the Pacific Science Center and managed the school programs at the Bellevue Botanical Garden. A wonderful job. Loved it. Was education coordinator for the Eastside Heritage Center, and presently am leading tree tours for the Tree Ambassador program, a fun program. Anyway, I want to extend my hearty thanks to the visionaries of Bellevue for preserving parklands over time. Thank you, because these parklands contribute much to our wellness and quality of life. My purpose as an educator is to ask the city of Bellevue to help acquire a property, the 12-acre Isola site opposite the Redtown Trailhead on the west side of Lakemont Boulevard. This space is unique. Why? Because it has historic significance and is an educational gem as an outdoor classroom. The site is where the Coal Creek Newcastle coal mines operated for 100 years. Coal was one of the first major industries in the Seattle region, bringing President Rutherford B. Hayes to the area in the 1890s. At that time, this operation was the third largest coaling port of the United States. This historic fact is important for studies of Washington State history. The book, The Coals of Newcastle, 100 Years of Hidden History, is available on Amazon and is a creditable and excellent resource. What better way for students to experience firsthand this history than to visit the local area where remnants of the coal mining days still exist? This is unique. I have a complimentary copy of this book for you all, and I hope you learn something new and enjoy the book. I will leave it here when I go. It's wonderful. This property is a perfect location for an outdoor classroom. The adjoining Bellevue and King County parklands are primarily forested, so a meadowland such as this would provide a whole new habitat experience. Local meadowlands are disappearing, so why not preserve a few for educational and recreational purposes? The meadow at Lewis Creek Park is lovely, but steep and not ADA accessible. The Isola property is relatively flat land. An ADA accessible loop would make the experience possible for people of all ages and abilities. A parking lot could be built to accommodate buses carrying up to 65 students, the present norm. And that's probably the end of my 3 minutes, right?
It is. Thank you. If you would like, you can always send your comments, any additional comments, to council@wwa.gov.
Okay, and I think you all have a copy of this with you so you can finish it off. Thank you so much, and enjoy the book.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher Randalls, who I believe is joining us virtually. Mr. Randalls, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Awesome. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, council members, and staff. Chris Randalls testifying on behalf of Complete Streets Bellevue and the Bellevue Housing Research Coalition to thank you all for the work that is being initiated this evening around micro-apartments. Our coalition, comprised of Complete Streets Bellevue, Eastside for All, the Housing Development Consortium, Northwest Progressive Institute, and Sightline Institute, commissioned Change Research to conduct a poll of 475 Bellevue residents between August 15th and August 19th to ask them their opinions on both the state of the housing market in Bellevue and potential solutions to create more market rate and affordable housing in the city. Best practices were used to ensure that the poll surveyed a selection of Bellevue's residents that was demographically, geographically, and socioeconomically representative. What we found is that there is a broad community support for the work that council has directed staff to undertake. 51% of city residents support removing barriers to the construction of microapartments. 79% of residents support lowering the cost of permit fees for affordable housing projects. And 80%, 4 in 5, supported reducing permitting turnaround time for housing projects. These numbers indicate that there is strong community backing for the actions that council has authorized, and our coalition sincerely appreciates the leadership in advancing these proposals forward. Our poll findings, some of which have been published in the Seattle Times and the Bellevue Reporter, contained many other helpful insights that we hope will guide your decision-making going forward as you continue to examine policies to further address our housing shortage. We are looking forward to continuing our conversations with council members and staff about our group's findings, and our coalition acknowledges that we still have a long way to go to addressing Bellevue's affordable housing crisis, but we are happy to take this moment to stop and appreciate all the work being done on these important steps. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Randalls. The next and final speaker on our pre-registered list is Alex Zimmerman.
Thank you.
Sie Heil, Dori dem Nazi-Fascism, bandita and psychopath, mafia cartel. My name is Alex Zimmerman, a president of Stand Up America. I'm very happy, so today we have a Columbus Day. Yeah, it's a little bit surprised me, but I'm very happy. We was this dirty Jew who opened, bad Jew who opened a good America, yes, and I'm proud of this for many years. So situation what as we have right now is Seattle in country, very critical and very interesting. Few years ago, Seattle changed this day to Indigenous Day. And for me, this is absolutely idiotic situation. I don't understand why this because, you know what it means, BIPAS? You know what it means controlling everything right now. And I don't understand this in first place, because it's for me look very idiotic. So, I try right now to speak to everybody who listen to me. It's only one chance, bring America back, stopping this Seattle degenerate idiot. 750,000 idiot, you know what it means? Doing something what is by definition absurd. This is exactly what has happened. It's a pure fascism. And I give you classic example what's happened. It's not about 12 trespasses, what as I come from Seattle to me for 4 years. I cannot go and speak. Last week in October 4, in Jewish holidays, they give me trespass for 1 month. Problem what is we have right now so critical, so I don't understand how is this possible. So Seattle Council President Deborah Warris is a mentally sick person, elect be a president only because she's belong to Native American, 50% only. 50% Mexican. I don't understand what is mean racism and fascism when we elect people who stupid, mentally sick, who cannot come to council chamber from May for 6 months. She only speak from the sky. So I speak right now to everybody who feel American. It's not about color, it's about who you are. When you're American, we need to stop this fascist idiot in Seattle. Is this a key to everything what is we have right now? Stand up, America. Stand up, everybody who believe in American Constitution. Viva America. Viva Constitution. Viva Trump. Thank you.
That is the end of our pre-registered list of speakers this evening. If there is anyone else joining us in council chambers or anyone joining us online who would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function or raise your hand in chambers. Okay, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands. That would close oral communications.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have report of our city manager, and our city manager is not feeling well. He is home tonight, so we have our Deputy City Manager, Diane Carlson, reporting in.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and council members. And good evening. It's nice to be here tonight. For tonight's manager's report, I have a good news item. Bellevue has been awarded with a 2022 Governor's Smart Communities Award this year for the Mobility Implementation Plan. This award recognizes outstanding efforts by local governments to create vibrant and livable communities by achieving the goals of the Growth Management Act. So joining us tonight is Andrew Singalakis, Director of the Transportation Department, and our guest Valerie Smith, Deputy Managing Director at the Washington State Department of Commerce. And I will turn it over to Andrew.
Okay, well, thank you, Deputy City Manager Carlson, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of the council. As Diane mentioned, we are here to receive an award for the Mobility Implementation Plan, an innovative approach to multimodal transportation. And this award is from the Governor's Smart Communities Award. I'd like to remind you that this is the second award that we ended up receiving for the Mobility Implementation Plan. The last one was from PSRC earlier in the year. And with me is Valerie Smith, the Deputy Managing Director of Growth Services at the Washington State Department of Commerce. But before I turn it over to her, I would like to acknowledge that we have Karen Stash, the Chair of the Transportation Commission, with us tonight, Kevin McDonald, who is the Project Manager for the MIP, and then also Paula Stevens, the Assistant Director of Transportation. And I believe there's a photo up after this, but with that, I'll turn it over to Valerie.
Okay. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to present this award today. On behalf of Governor Jay Inslee and Commerce Director Lisa Brown, I am pleased to present this Smart Communities Project Award to the City of Bellevue. This award highlights the governor's commitment to preserving and protecting Washington's desirable quality of life and recognizes the hard work of our communities, residents, and local officials to make sure we have a clean environment, equitable access to amenities, and high-quality, affordable communities, all the attributes that make our great state a wonderful place to live, work, and play. This specific award highlights progress for the entire state by moving the needle on multimodal connectivity, acting as a model for other communities to implement, and also forwards our accessibility and climate sustainability goals, which are priorities of Governor Inslee and core objectives of the Department of Commerce. As Andrew mentioned, today we're celebrating a collaborative and thorough effort to implement goals, policies, and plans to encourage a multimodal approach for Bellevue residents. The MIP and its future outcomes, like the multimodal concurrency code, will continue to serve the community and region for decades to come. We are encouraged by the high standards set by this project. The implementation plan provides an open and transparent process for public identification and prioritization that will lead to comprehensive and sustainable projects that are consistent with the city's capital investment program and the state's Growth Management Act. Also noteworthy was the excellent public outreach efforts by staff and teams to get this project out into the public for feedback and information sessions. This included a series of study sessions, an accessible webpage, and the community questionnaire that received over 500 responses. Very impressive. So to the City of Bellevue, Mayor Robinson, council members, and the city's transportation commissioners, thank you. Thank you for committing to strengthening our communities in the Washington state, and a special thank you to staff that shepherded this project through and providing technical assistance and dedication to consistency with the Growth Management Act. On behalf of Governor Inslee, I thank you again for your hard work, innovation, and amazing model for planning for future growth, development, and redevelopment in communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that award. I know the Mobility Implementation Plan is a strong reflection of the council values and goals, and our staff has worked very hard on this. So it's great to be recognized. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely shown through in the application. And I also have certificates and then the award itself too. Yep. So I'll give these to you actually.
Next, we have consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve it?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's see. We have 3 study session items tonight. The first one's my favorite topic. So, Deputy City Manager, would you like to introduce it?
Thank you, Mayor. Our first study session tonight is an informational update for council. It will be on the progress of the affordable housing strategy implementation, and staff will also provide a look forward to upcoming planning and implementation work related to housing. Joining us this evening are Emil King, Planning Director, and with Community Development, and also Linda Abe, our new Affordable Housing Manager. So with that, I will turn it over to Emil.
Thank you for the introduction, Deputy City Manager Carlson, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Tonight is our semi-annual update on the implementation of the affordable housing strategy. Housing continues to be one of the key issues we're dedicating significant staff time and resources to right now. On behalf of the larger staff team that continues to work on these issues, we'll be providing an update on our progress. We continue to gain momentum with our efforts, and we'll be able to highlight many of the successes that we've accomplished over the past 6 months. I'd like to first do a formal introduction to council of Linda Abe. She's our new Affordable Housing Program Manager in the Community Development Department. It's a very tight job market out there, so we're really happy to have Linda joining the city. She's very familiar with the city of Bellevue. I've known her in the past as a developer with Sioux Development, actually building market rate and affordable units in the city, and then she has consultant experience working on issues within the city of Bellevue as well. So I'm going to let her say for a few words of introduction as well.
Well, good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the council. As Emil mentioned, I actually have had an opportunity to work with some of you at AECOM when I was working on the Cross-Cultural Center feasibility study, and also as a real estate developer with Sioux Development here in Bellevue. I appreciate the warm welcome and support that I've received since I started working here in August, and I'm just really excited about working with the city to bring my experience and passion for affordable housing as the new Affordable Housing Manager. So really looking forward to this partnership and serving the city.
Great, welcome.
Apologies, we're having some technical difficulties here. Can you pause for 1 minute? Thank you.
I'm going to excuse myself and get some water. I'll be right back.
Mr. King, was that you that advanced the slide, or was that us? All right, we're good to go. Thank you.
Chair, do you want to take over?
I will. We might as well start then. Go ahead. Thank you.
Tonight's briefing is for information only. No action is required. We'll be doing a short presentation, and then we're happy to hear feedback and respond to any questions the council may have following the presentation. Tonight, we're going to be covering how we're doing on the actions and the affordable housing target from the 2017 strategy. We're going to go into a bit of detail on how we've been achieving progress on the 2017 to the 2027 target that is in process, and there's still quite a bit more to do in the remaining 5 years. We'll do a review of the recent accomplishments and the significant body of ongoing work, highlighting some of the current work that we're undertaking. And then we'll go ahead and conclude with a review of the upcoming work program items from the Next Right Work process.
This is an exciting time to implement and execute the work that the council made a priority with the adoption of the affordable housing strategy in 2017. We are now a few months beyond the halfway point since the launch of the affordable housing strategy in 2017. The actions taken to date have achieved approximately 2,072 units of new and preserved units, including beds, with 806 units in the pipeline. This confirms the actions and strategies that have been implemented to date have helped deliver affordable units on track with our initial projections. Note that the old target of 2,500 units will potentially be updated with the new housing needs assessment that will be completed at the end of this month. This foundational work, along with new staff positions in affordable housing, create the opportunity to build on this and to do more. In the July 5th council meeting, council directed staff to launch the Next Right Work, the term we use to describe the actions staff will be focusing on for the next 12 to 18 months to supplement ongoing work. Before we get into the Next Right Work discussion, we wanted to run through some of the recent and ongoing housing work being taken by staff. Consistent with all residential development, the work needed for producing units is embedded within the framework that planning and zoning facilitates. This table shows action items that are a combination of ongoing work to implement affordable housing and discrete policy or code actions. In the following slides, Emil and I will provide an update to the comp plan periodic update, state regional planning, the C1 Phase 2 program, the Housing Stability Program, and the Multifamily Tax Exemption Program.
I'm going to go into a bit of detail on some of the major efforts that we're working on right now, just so the council and public can understand the breadth of work that we're doing. So the big effort right now that we have a number of staff working on and a lot of interest in the community is the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update. The project is well underway. We have a whole host of consultants working on this. We're ready to do the environmental impact statement, and we had a significant milestone just in the past week and a half of issuing the scoping notice for the environmental impact statement. So we have a 30-day window where stakeholders and the community can offer up insights into the range of options that we'll be looking at. The environmental review process is a really important process where we can step back and look at a range of different housing options for the city. The idea of looking at significant missing middle typologies in the city, as well as looking for additional housing capacity in our urban centers is a key thing that's part of this. There's also discussion of homelessness and the relationship to our approach to housing and human services. And as we kind of go out into the community, we're getting a lot of interest in this update, and it is something that the council and community are saying we're doing bold actions as part of this body of work. The next area I want to highlight is our state and regional planning work. Just for context, we have about 66,000 units in the city right now, and our minimum housing target through the King County process was to add a minimum of 35,000 new housing units. Through our work with the council, our EIS is going to look at adding substantial more capacity, potentially above and beyond that. So the EIS does provide us a great opportunity to go look and see what the benefits and impacts of doing that might be over the next 20-year period. As we're working with the State Department of Commerce and King County on our affordable housing needs, there's a heightened process that's happening in this comp plan update as opposed to the updates we've done 10 and 20 years ago. So as we refine our local needs assessment, we'll be doing that in context of both these state and regional efforts on looking at affordable housing need. We'll be able to report back to council as both the regional process and our local process unfolds as far as what our local housing need is and what our local affordable housing target should be. I want to give an update on the C1 Phase 2 work as well. As council remembers, the Phase 1 work did allow for a 50% density bonus for faith-based properties, nonprofit, and public surplus properties who are interested in doing affordable housing. The Phase 2 process is looking at about 30 sites that are faith-based in single-family zones for consideration of multifamily zoning. And these would need to be 100% affordable, frequent transit, proximity to multifamily or commercial zoning. The Planning Commission just recently held their public hearing and did a recommendation that will be sent along to the City Council in the November timeframe. We're already getting interest in the Phase 1 density bonus, and we're also getting some interest in the Phase 2 density bonus as well. So that's positive that we're doing actions that people are going to use.
Last year, the Housing Stability Program's two RFPs resulted in $1.7 million being allocated for housing and related services, which included the behavioral health services. The capital RFP allocated up to $1.6 million towards LifeWire to fund the rehab of 25 units for victims of domestic violence. As we look forward to year 2 of the Housing Stability Program, the city has received multiple applications for the current RFP for behavioral health and related services, as well as for the capital RFP. A team of interdepartmental staff will work with ARCH, a regional coalition for housing, to review the applications with the goal of providing funding recommendations to council in the first quarter of 2023. In terms of our multifamily tax exemption program, we are still seeing quite a bit of use, and it's continuing to perform well. This is evidenced by the 147 affordable units achieved through this program since the update. We have nearly 300 potential MFTE units that are expected to apply in the next year or so, representing projects that are likely to be completed over the next 2 to 3 years. Beyond the current units in the pipeline, 2 recent MFTE applications have been received since the April biannual update, totaling an additional 79 units. This growing pipeline of affordable housing units is in line with and exceeds our MFTE expectations.
So I'm going to be moving on to the discussion of the next right work. And this was the process that we undertook back in the early spring and summer to identify what should be the next right work to go on beyond the 2017 affordable housing strategy. In July of this year, we did receive direction from council to move forward with 3 items directly to launch. And those included the removing the barriers to the micro apartments, which you'll be hearing in study session right after this presentation. And then staff is readying the 2 other actions regarding the higher FAR or density for residential, as well as reducing the permit fees for affordable housing. And those are targeted to be launched in the December timeframe. The other part of the direction from council was to look at a capacity analysis so that we could examine how to accomplish more. And we're undertaking that capacity analysis right now at the staff level. And we'll also be looking at what we might do with the additional funds that were included by the city manager in the preliminary 23-24 budget and see how that could supplement our existing work on affordable housing actions. And then the last part of the council direction was to conduct scoping for 2 additional actions, and those were streamlining the permitting process and expediting permitting for affordable housing. And the last one was to look at allowing middle-scale housing types, including detached ADUs, attached dwelling units, duplex, triplex, quadplexes. So we'll be reporting back to council on those 2 items on our progress of the scoping in the December timeframe as well. So Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to hear any comments from Council or answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I just want to remind Council that our next study session item tonight is about microhousing, so save your comments and questions for that conversation. But Councilmember Stokes was Mayor Stokes when we voted in our affordable housing strategy, so I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is really very exciting. When I first read this and you read the package, what we're doing now, I thought, okay, first was, it's great. We're talking about this. It's been 5 years. 2017, as I like to say, is another world. And what is really exciting and going forward is what you have done in this last year, and particularly this year, of looking at the next right work and realizing that we can celebrate 2,050 new units. But that's 5 years ago. That was a lot. It's not very much now. And you're really focusing in going forward. So what's exciting then council member Lynn Robinson and I and Michael Cotterman, who is here working with that, we all and a lot of staff and other council members, we work together, and that's what's the great thing about it. And it's exciting to see where you're proposing to go now. And the challenge has just gotten much, much more. But we've learned a lot, and I really appreciate the fact that we're increasing staff work, increasing the approaches we take, and actually, I think, given the program we're working on, and we're going to talk about it later and where we go next, but we're going to have to do so much more. The good news is we know how to do it now, much more than we did 5 years ago. And I think the community is more responsive, both the people, our constituents, as well as the businesses and other groups. So we're getting in a really kind of a sweet spot for a city to be able to really meet the needs. And what you're lining out now and what we're working on going forward is, I think we can get there. It's like the little train that could. We think we can. We think we can. I loved that when I was a kid. I guess that's why I got into trains. And I think we're going there. So I appreciate it very much, and good to have this report. And it's the best one we've had in all the time we've looked at this. And so I'm excited about it, and I think we're all committed to really working hard on this with you. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'll call on Councilmember Robertson, then Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Zahn, Lee, and then myself.
All right, thank you. First, welcome, Linda. Really happy to have you on board. Really excited to have you doing this work with us. Exciting is exactly the word Councilmember Stokes said. This is really exciting. It's exactly the word that I wrote down on my paper. Really exciting to see the progress. We are well overshooting our 10-year goal. We could even end up more than doubling delivery of units in that 10-year program at the rate we're going if we stay on track. I also wanted to thank staff for all the hard work on this, and our stakeholders. The Chamber of Commerce in particular really helped make the MFTE program better, and that is paying off so much. So I think that as we continue to gather stakeholders, as we do this work, we're going to end up with a better product that is more effective. So I think that's great. And then just one comment, just to give my colleagues a heads up here and give a suggestion to staff about the C1 Phase 2. That is a comp plan amendment that is coming forward to council this cycle before the end of the year. I'm not sure when it's coming. I was at the Planning Commission for the public hearing. The public was confused a little bit about what it means, and they were about 2/3, 1/3 against. So 2/3 against, 1/3 in favor of that. And I think that it was because they didn't really know what it meant. And so I explained to the public that was there that the comp plan amendment just sets the table for getting the details in the land use code. I'm supportive of the comp plan amendment, but I wanted to make the comment so that the public who's listening, the details and the confusion that people have about that will be addressed with public input next year when we do the land use code. So assuming council passes that comp plan amendment, that's when all the details will come out, and that's when the public who have concerns about that or are really excited about it, want to see it work really well, should get involved. So my ask of staff is that as that comp plan amendment comes forward to council, to make it really clear in both presenting to council and in the materials that the public is looking at, what it is and what it isn't. Because I think that we will go from 2/3, 1/3 to 90% in favor if people understand what it is. And so that's my ask for you. And because I think it'll be great. The land use code is where the details are, and that's what will happen next year. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the update email, and Linda, just a couple of questions. So I'm looking forward to that housing needs assessment, but I was curious about how we might reconcile any differences in need from that versus the growth targets that we've already talked about. So if there's a difference in terms of, let's say there are more that come out of the housing needs, how would we reconcile that? And then my second comment / question is, it looked like preservation of existing affordable housing produced the most units from the table. So I was curious about how are we going after additional opportunities to preserve affordable housing, or just what the opportunities there are. Thanks.
Thanks for those questions, Councilmember Barksdale. I can briefly address those. As far as the growth targets and the affordable housing needs that are being done at the state and county level, we are definitely looking at that information that is getting fed into our regional planning efforts. We're able at the city level to get into a little bit more detail about the specific needs of our community. So as we continue that technical work, both at the King County level and city level, we'll be able to report back to our elected officials who represent us on those different bodies, as well as when we report back to council about any reconciliation of numbers that might be different in those two technical analysis. As far as preservation, the last 5 years have had quite a bit of preservation, and those have been really good opportunities for the city to pursue. You have typically naturally occurring affordable housing that may not have covenants on it that we're able to protect for the long term. So our leverage rate on being able to maximize our investment has been quite high on those partnerships. So I think we're going to see continuing more preservation opportunities as well as new development as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, any reconciliation, we'll discuss that as a council when if based on what comes out of that. And then in terms of the preservation, are we actively looking for opportunities, or is that just something that we sort of wait to see what happens with some of the units in the city?
As far as the reconciliation, we have the mayor and deputy mayor do represent us on some regional planning bodies, so we do work with our representatives as we work through both the state and county processes. And this work is part of our periodic plan update, so we're happy to include materials as we update council in the December, January timeframe about how we're doing on our periodic update with updates to the full council. As far as preservation, in the past years, we've been more opportunistic in being able to partner with others on preservation, especially when we've been putting money in. The Housing Stability Program / 1590 program is going to afford us a bigger opportunity in the future to perhaps proactively go seek out preservation opportunities that might be us alone or with partners out there. So I think there's a growing role for the city potentially in the future at looking at preservation opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, followed by Councilmember Zahn.
Thank you, Mayor. Linda, again, welcome, and thank you for being so immediately engaged with the community as well, as we see some of those emails flying back and forth from community members looking for more information about affordable housing. So, and I agree with my my colleague, Councilmember Robertson. There is a little bit of confusion for me at least, what I've heard from residents, at least as it relates to faith properties. I think that's a good FYI that I think we need to do a little bit more education or outreach and exactly what that means and who's eligible and who's not. So, but in terms of the presentation, fantastic. As was already been said, exciting in terms of the next right work, in terms of the overall strategy, the number of units that we're creating, hopefully preserving. I think Councilmember Barksdale's question is a good one. I'd like to make sure that, as exciting as new units are, preserving what we have as well is just equally as important. So I appreciate the fact that we've been reactive when an opportunity comes along, but certainly having an ongoing program where we look to intentionally and be proactive about maintaining those units is equally important. But and love the update on the MFTE program, which continues to go in the right direction for us, which is really exciting to see. And I think you're right on point here in terms of the next right work, and appreciate the real clear targeting of the council priorities on this. So very happy. Can't wait for more updates as we proceed. The micro apartments today, and then others in December. So this is very exciting work. Thank you.
Council members, did you want?
No,
okay,
thank you.
Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Emil and Linda. I'm so excited, Linda, to have your voice on staff and working with you on this. I echo my colleagues. I think that having this affordable housing strategy and getting the update is really important. And I'm going to say triple down on Councilmember Barksdale's comment about preservation and just making sure that while we have our eye on building new, that we're not losing ground, and to the degree we can be more proactive on preservation, that'll be even more important. I did have a couple of questions, and that is that I think in one of the slides you talk about homelessness and tied to housing and human services, and I noticed in our packet, the table on page 2, we are categorizing shelter beds from CFH and Mary's Place, the 90 rooms, as less than 30% AMI affordable housing. So I just wanted to better understand whether that's how we're defining shelter beds that as affordable housing, because I'm not sure that that characterization is what we want to be counting those as. And then my other comment is, although I'm excited to see the pipeline growing, I see that we're only about 10% of the units is less than 30% AMI, which then leads to the comments that have been made previously by Councilmember Barksdale about the local housing needs assessment. And I'm actually particularly interested in the timing of getting that information, because if we're seeing the pipeline not specifically bringing in more housing at the less than 30%, is that really going to meet our housing needs assessment? You've mentioned December, January. Is that the timing when we expect Commerce and King County to be done with that work, so we can better align our strategies and what percent AMI they are at with where we need to go? And then lastly, my question is on the 1590 slide on RFP, I think it said the $10.5 million. Can you clarify whether that is the amount of budget that we have, or is that the amount of applications we've received so far? Because I do think that the 1590 money is one way that if there is sufficient requests and proposals, that we had talked about being able to bond against future revenues to move even faster with being able to have more affordable housing. So those are my questions. Excited that we're getting going with the next right work and moving even faster. Thank you.
I can go ahead and briefly answer those questions for Councilmember Zahn. As far as the permanent men's shelter and the Mary's Place, we do have those included in our tally in the memo. We did separate that out so it's clear for the council and the public to see where we're putting those. In our updated needs assessment and targets that we'll be working with council over the coming months, we can figure out if we want to have those as a separate category for a target. But in the 2017 strategy, they were included in the whole body of affordable housing umbrella. So that's why they're part of that 2,500, at least looking backwards. Looking forwards, we can take a different approach if the majority council would like to do that. The local needs assessment, we've engaged our consultant assistance on that. We have a staff team that's working with the consultant to get the background information, and we'll be starting to get some actual work that we can give feedback to the consultant on in the coming weeks on that project. The county effort does have some milestone meetings over the next couple months. So as the county process moves along and our local process moves along, we'll figure out how we can get council updates on those companion complementary processes that we have for local needs. It's right on to point out that the under 30% AMI units are the most difficult ones to get, and that's why we're paying a keen eye to some of the state and county work that has fairly large numbers of that 0 to 30% AMI need out there, and trying to see how reasonable that is and achievable it is for not just Bellevue, but all cities in the state and the county. And then lastly, the 10.5 million that we advertised as part of the capital and operating RFP was the amount, the up to amount that we had available. So as Linda mentioned, we are going to be looking at the applications that we got in, and we'll be reporting back to council in Q1 of next year about the staff recommendation on how to use either a portion or all of that money. At that time, we can also give an update on thoughts about potentially moving into a bonding scenario for a capital investment or preservation.
Well, that's great. I know that the first round, we didn't get very many proposals, so hopefully we're able to engage with the development community and are able to see more of that. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm jealous how good my virtual colleagues look and prominently than we do. Anyway, that's beside the point. Thanks for the presentation. I think it's a lot of good information. You basically reinforce in our thinking that, we are doing the right thing. We are on target. Your estimate of 2,500 units, I'm very confident that we're going to beat that. And so we are on the right track. However, because we're moving in the right direction, doing it well, one of the, everything we're doing seems to be very well done. We got, good people joining us because we're successful. And I think the market, the developers, the private partners are very supportive. We're on the right track. So obviously, the better we do, the more we want to do. So because the need is out there, until we reach the goal, we have to continue. However, my concern is I want to make a point that we are learning from you. Briefings and talking to you, and we are represented, by our colleagues in regional committees. We know what's going on. But even as we talk, as we briefed, I personally, I don't know about my colleagues. I don't know everything that's going on. I can keep track of all this. It's a very important, big topic. We're talking about affordable housing, but it's housing. And what is affordable? And I think, so I believe that it's important that we talk to the public. We reach out to the public. We do our public outreach, very important. As we go forward, the more we do, the more we succeed, even now, we need to bring them on board. It's a public process. And people don't know what they don't know. And by the time they find out, they'll be questioning, they'll be asking us, and we have to know what it is. And I think we are, again, we can, but they need to be on board. So I really want to emphasize that. It's very complicated, very complex. We do the best we can. However, my understanding, I know for sure, a big percentage of the community don't know. They know we do affordable housing, but what is affordable housing? How are we doing it? All the details we're talking about, all the change we're incorporating because we're moving forward. As we do more, we need to engage them so that they can understand, digest. So even as we do well, that's the most important thing. I think Councilmember Robertson mentioned that, right? We do the comp plan. We have many ways to understand, to approve, to move the next step. All these things need to be informed, to be to the public as we do the, micro apartment, inclusionary housing, religious properties. All these people are saying, gee, what are we doing with our zoning? What are we doing with our housing code? So I think that they got to be on board. If they miss a piece of it, they're going to be in trouble. So
Thank
I
you
want to emphasize that.
emphasizing
Thank you.
the public education. I appreciate that. I will just say, Linda, I'm so glad you're on board. I always think Bellevue has the most amazing staff, and here we go. Now we get to you. So when we set that goal, we felt it was very low, and we knew we could surpass it. It was not a limitation, and so I'm grateful that we are actually going to surpass that goal, and I hope that we can reset and come up with something a little more ambitious that reflects the tremendous growth that the city is experiencing. I have a question. You talked about in the presentation, or at least in the packet, when we have overlapping, a developer using the MFTE plus an incentive, and I'm wondering when those two overlap, what AMI do we end up creating with the units that they build?
The overlapping units are 65%
Okay.
AMI.
All right, great. That's great. Well, thank you. Excellent work. Very excited to see what comes next. Oh, yes?
Can I have a little short thing?
Sure.
Okay. Real quickly, yes, and Linda, I didn't welcome you personally, so I'm adding to everybody else. It's really exciting. One thing I wanted to highlight now, and it's a thing we need to memorialize and think about, is Highland Village. And that was the start of this, and we worked all together on that, and that was a successful thing. And again, that's where we kind of learned our ropes on this, and so I still have a little thing up from the community on that, but thanks to the city, and it's just great. We need to keep that in mind. We can do it, and we did it with that, and we're going to do great things. So thanks very much, and I think we had a good conversation here, and I appreciate Councilmember Lee's mentioning about, and others about communicating with the community. We need to do that. We need to keep working on that and do a better job. So thank you very much.
Highland Village happened with a lot of community input and a lot of community partners. Okay, thank you. Let's take a break, a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 7:20. I'm assuming we have our remote council members. There's one. Okay, we have our second study session item tonight. Would you like to introduce that?
Thank you, Mayor. Our next item, one that you referenced earlier, is one that responds to action B1 in the affordable housing strategy, and that is removing barriers to micro apartments. Staff are seeking council direction to initiate and direct the Planning Commission to process a land use code amendment that would enable and encourage micro apartments in Bellevue. Joining us this evening are Liz Stead, Interim Co-Director for Development Services, and Nick Whipple, Planning Manager, and Matthew Menard, Senior Planner for Development Services. And I will turn it over to Liz to kick off the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, council members. Thank you for having us here tonight to continue the conversation that our friends at Community Development started this evening around the affordable housing strategy. So we're here tonight to talk about micro apartments and to look at initiating a work item to remove barriers to providing those in the city. This is consistent with the work that was directed July 5th by Council for the affordable housing strategy and our next right work. And we do have two other items, which I know Mr. King mentioned we will be bringing back in the next couple of months. So this is our first shot out of the gate, and we're very excited to be here tonight and starting this work. We have had interest from the public at times on this topic from different developers and such. So I think it's good timing, and it's a ripe conversation for this evening. So I'm going to pass it off to Nick Whipple and Matthew Menard from Development Services to start the presentation. Nick?
Great, thank you, Liz, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis. I'm attempting to advance the slides here, and here we go. So as Liz mentioned, we are seeking direction from the council tonight to initiate this land use code amendment and direct the Planning Commission to process this code amendment that would ultimately enable the construction of micro apartments in the city of Bellevue. So for our agenda this evening, we wanted to take some time to just explain what a micro apartment is, also lay out some of the objectives for this land use code amendment. We'll cover what we are proposing as the scope for the Planning Commission, and then talk about our engagement process that we are planning for this, and then the LUCA schedule for this item as well. So to begin with, what is a micro apartment? Micro apartments, they are an important housing type that allows for individuals of modest incomes the ability to live in Bellevue, often near work or near school. Micro apartments, they do not have a standard definition, but a micro apartment is really akin to a small studio or loft apartment. They're typically less than 400 square feet in size, with fully functioning kitchens and a bathroom. Due to the requirement for a kitchen and a bathroom, micro apartments are a bit different than a dorm or other single room occupancy units that would rely upon a communal kitchen or a communal bathroom facility or other types of group quarters, congregate care housing type of arrangements. So micro units or micro apartments are ideally located near jobs, transit, shopping, and services to serve those that have the desire to live in a more walkable area. They do provide a lower cost option for people coming to our city. The smaller size does lead to lower costs. Generally, the rent is between $900 to $1,500 a month is what we're seeing right now in the market. So that falls into the price range of about 40 to 70% AMI for studio housing in King County. So the appeal of micro apartments is largely about economics, but there is, of course, place and privacy. They weigh into that equation as well. And with that, they are well suited for students and young professionals, people that are in transition, as well as retirees. So a few examples, these units are, it's a couple examples, one from Redmond and one from Seattle. And really the appearance of micro apartments is much like that of a traditional apartment building with the same scale and massing that you would see for other multifamily type developments in the city. Some locations of micro units are within mixed buildings, so you'll have some 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, studio, and micro all in one building. And we also have an example of an interior micro apartment. This is the Dockside Apartments at Green Lake in Seattle. That is a loft design, so you can see the kitchen is off to the bottom left there. So as mentioned earlier, this LUCA is really in response to the affordable housing strategy. So strategy B calls for the creation of a variety of housing choices. And it calls to allow or offer more types of housing, including lower priced options near jobs, transit, shopping, and services. It most directly relates to action B1, which is to encourage micro apartments around light rail stations through actions such as reduced parking requirements. And then, as mentioned earlier, at Council's discussion on July 5th, this item was directed under the Next Right Work, specifically to remove barriers to micro apartments. So what the LUCA will aim to do is remove barriers to the construction of micro apartments. So we have currently few micro apartments that exist in the city. It's really important to note that we do not have a prohibition on micro apartments, but often some of our requirements make it so that it's not an attractive or feasible construction type in the city. So from a construction standpoint, building a micro apartment can cost more per square foot because of the relative fixed costs associated with building a kitchen and a bathroom, which is generally the same for a micro apartment as it would be for a conventional apartment. And other added costs that can stem from not having enough density. Certain areas in the city have density limitations that are expressed through a dwelling unit per acre measurement rather than a floor area measurement. And so we would be asking the Planning Commission to take a look at whether some of those limits should be adjusted to allow for this housing type. And also with the requirement for minimum parking or a higher requirement for minimum parking can add some cost to this type of development. And there are also residential amenities that could add cost to this housing type. The example of residential amenities that we're thinking about includes multifamily play areas. As an example, so in that previous slide, we mentioned the target demographics for this. It typically does not include families. So having a multifamily play area may not be as compatible with this housing type. So those are the types of items that we'd have the Planning Commission take a look at. So with that, I will have Matthew Menard walk us through the proposed scope for this land use code amendment.
Thanks, Nick, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Nierenhaus, and members of council. As Nick noted, I will start with the scope of the LUCA. Again, to reiterate, the objective is to remove barriers to micro apartments within the city. So the first step is defining what a micro apartment is, and generally with that you would set a size limitation on the maximum size of a micro apartment. The second step is ensuring that micro apartments are accessible to all people who would like to live in them. This includes ADA requirements and items such as that. And then exploring and updating the code in relation to what Nick was talking about. So parking limits or parking requirements, density limits, and those amenity requirements, things like playgrounds, ground floor active uses, items like that. The proposed geographic scope is all mixed-use land use districts within the city that allow for both commercial and multifamily development. There are a few mixed-use districts within the city that allow for commercial and single-family development only. We would not be proposing that for these areas. And I should note we are not proposing this for areas that do not allow for commercial development. So it would not be proposed in single-family neighborhoods or only multifamily neighborhoods as well. The goal of that is to remove these barriers to micro apartments in those mixed-use areas that multifamily is already allowed, so this being a similar and compatible development type to that multifamily housing. And as micro apartments often cater to people who may not have a car as they have limited parking, we would like to place those in vicinities to service and transit and any day-to-day needs they may have. You can see on the map there the pink areas shown on the map are the proposed scope, and the dashed line are those areas within the city that are served by high-frequency transit. So that's 4 stops per hour. Hopefully with the end goal being promoting more housing choices within the city, consistent with the affordable housing strategy, and potentially a more ecologically friendly housing and transportation system. In terms of public engagement, we will follow the process for requirements as laid out in the land use code. This does include planning commission meetings, city council meetings, public hearings, public noticing to make sure the public is available to be put input through this whole process. We are also planning for direct engagement that includes engaging with micro apartment developers, some affordable housing developers, micro apartment residents, our local community here. And we're hoping to do that through one-on-ones, stakeholder meetings, and potentially an open house to make sure that everyone is well informed of what we're doing throughout the process. We will also have a web page to make sure that the citizens of Bellevue can know who to reach out to gather information on this project. The process, if you do choose to launch this evening, we are planning to hold Planning Commission study sessions Q4 and Q4 of this year and Q1 of 2023, holding the public hearing hopefully around Q1 of 2023 for the Planning Commission, and then moving it on to Council with study sessions in Q1 and aiming for adoption around Q2 of 2023. And finally, we are asking for initiation and then direction for the Planning Commission to process this land use code amendment. And with that, Mayor, I will hand it back to you.
Great presentation. Thank you. Well, I'm excited about this conversation, but we'll start with Councilmember Zahn, followed by Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Barksdale, Councilmember Robertson, Lee, Stokes, and then myself.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited to see this work move forward. I think, as I mentioned, being an immigrant from Hong Kong, where the units are significantly smaller, and we know that there are a lot of immigrants into our community, being able to have this housing choice will be really important. The thing that I was thinking about in your presentation was the comment that currently there's not a prohibition to microhousing. So really understanding then, and I appreciate the way that you describe what are then the barriers to getting the housing, the micro housing, and maybe similar to MFTE, that, what are the kind of barriers to getting that done? You talked about the higher cost per square foot of these units because of the having a bathroom and a fully built out kitchen. So I guess one of my questions is, as you look at this work, is it possible to look at different types of kitchen arrangements all the way from a full kitchen to something maybe slightly less? Because I'm not sure that maybe for every one of these units, it always makes sense for us to dictate it being a full kitchen. So that's actually one of my questions. And then the second one is, I think you also mentioned that at the $900 to the $1,500, it equates it to about 40 to 70% AMI. So my question is, can we think about, as this part of this work, what would the amenities look like if we were trying to get to a 30% AMI for any of these units, so that they start to also be able to serve the 30% AMI community? So anyway, those were some of my questions. I do really appreciate and like the idea of that these micro units would be mixed in with other housing sizes within a building. So we're not saying that we're building one whole building, that we are looking at a whole building with micro housing. But those are some comments and thoughts that I have as we move forward with the micro housing. So if you could respond to a couple of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Regarding the kitchen issue, I'm going to have Nick address that. We have talked about that a little bit, so he will have some. And in terms of mixing the units in, that would certainly be part of our goal, is to provide an opportunity for them to be one piece of all of the different unit sizes in a project. As it is put forward right now, we could have a full building that is just the micro units, with the code as we've been thinking about it. But certainly we will look for recommendations from the council for the Planning Commission and how you'd like us to proceed moving forward on that. Nick, do you want to discuss the kitchen?
Sure. So thank you, Councilmember Zahn, for the question around the idea of a communal space where you might have a shared kitchen or perhaps a shared bathroom area. The land use code currently does allow for those types of living arrangements. We have group quarters that are permitted by the land use code. Group quarters do include dormitories. They also include congregate housing. And so that is something that is available in the land use code today. That's something that we can certainly have the Planning Commission take a look at and consider whether our current definitions are meeting our needs. If that's the will of the council, we can definitely include that in the scope.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, because I know I've visited friends where they have a unit that has a bathroom, but they have a much smaller kitchen type, a kitchenette. And then there is a communal space where if they wanted to do cooking, there's an opportunity for that. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
So how do you want to get consensus on what we recommend to the Planning Commission? Are you going to come back to us at another time and we'll have these discussions, or do you want some kind of a consensus tonight? Or is this just something we're asking the Planning Commission to consider?
It would be something that, if the council wishes the Planning Commission to consider, that's probably the best direction. If you can come to some conclusion amongst yourselves of which topics, that would certainly make it the easiest to move this forward with the Planning Commission.
Because that's what we're doing tonight, is we are deciding whether to advance this to the Planning Commission or not. So if we can bring things that we'd like the Planning Commission to consider, and if you like Councilmember Zahn's recommendations, please mention that in your comments. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, thank you. And anytime we talk about streamlining the permitting process, removing barriers, I'm in. So thanks so much for bringing this forward. And I'm in favor of moving this forward to the Planning Commission. I think this is good work that we need to do. Couple of questions, and these questions can also be interpreted things that would also like where appropriate, the Planning Commission to think about as well. So first question is, I'm just curious about, since we just mentioned here that technically there's no barrier to developers doing micro apartments right now. So what is the appetite out there right now from developers to create these type of units? I'm really just interested in what we might expect in terms of overall inventory of these type of units, maybe within, I don't know, the first couple of years or first 5 years. I know one developer that has a strong interest in this area, but outside of that, I'm not sure what we can expect in terms of adding this type of affordable housing to our overall inventory. And then also just speaking of that, I think it's really important, not for us to necessarily get in the weeds here, but I think really talking to those developers that specialize in these types of micro apartments to find out what works best. And I think you had mentioned that in your comments already about discussing with stakeholders, but be it full kitchen, half kitchen, whatever. Let's really make use of the expertise of those developers that have built it in other cities and successfully. Want to make sure we take a look at that. And then finally, I wanted to ask a question just about the overall outreach to the potentially impacted neighborhoods, and just primarily around parking. Because as much as we want and encourage folks to use transit or public transportation, the fact of the matter is a lot of them will still have cars and will need a car in order to get to their job or family or what have you. So what do we have planned there where there is an overflow of cars? I mean, they'll have to go somewhere, so potentially neighborhoods could get impacted. Maybe not, hopefully not, but I just want us to be prepared for that in case that becomes a scenario that we need to react to.
So we could ask the Planning Commission to study impacts on parking.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Barksdale.
Could they answer my questions first, or answer?
Well, okay, but I mean, I don't think we're trying to solve any problems. I think we're trying to give the Planning Commission guidance on what we want them to look into. But sure, we'll have staff respond.
Okay.
We can briefly respond just on some of the questions around demand. So For micro housing, they are not common, but they do occur on the east side. So Kirkland and Redmond as some examples where we are seeing micro housing developments spring up. And so, of course, Seattle has a longer history with micro apartments, but we are starting to see those emerge on the east side as well. Okay. And in terms of what the affordable housing strategy estimates, I mean, this is the 2017 strategy, but it did estimate between 100 and 200 units being created through this action. So it's difficult to say, I guess, how we might meet that target or exceed that target without knowing fully what the barriers are that we're planning to address through this update. And we will certainly continue talking with the development community as well as our neighboring cities on what they've found as some of those successes and challenges, and extra sensitive to any sort of impacts that might occur around neighborhoods. The geographic scope is trying to get ahead of that a bit with allowing these only in our mixed-use areas, so trying to locate those proximate to transit as well as jobs and services. So you are really making it easier for people to make the choice not to drive their vehicles, but that is something that we'll certainly be paying close attention to as we move this through the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just a few questions here. I think that one or a couple may build on what's already been raised. I'm curious about the size and sort of what's the smallest size, whether we should have a minimum size. I know we're trying to reduce barriers, but thinking about it from also the resident, is there a size that's too small? And then also, I appreciated the comments I think Councilmember Zahn raised about the amenities and getting to 30% AMI. And I'm curious about what that right mix of amenities might be as well. Again, from the resident's perspective, especially if we're targeting some of our tech workers who are just starting their careers or retail workers and so forth. I mean, curious about how important it is for them to have their own kitchen and bathroom. And then the last piece is, well, two parts. Is it possible to have affordable units or incentivize affordable units as part of these? So I also like the idea of maybe mixing it in. I'm also fine with it being a complete building in and of itself, but curious either way if there's an opportunity to build in affordable units, and I guess that's at 30% as well. And then lastly, how are they performing in other cities? And I'm really thinking about if this is sort of an alternative to a studio, are we seeing that they are staying sort of affordable, even if it's market rate, compared to studios, or are we seeing prices increase to studio levels? So I'm just curious about what that looks like from an affordability perspective over time.
Okay, so I've written all those down, but I will let staff answer. Sorry, I should do that each time.
So in terms of the size limitation, we were focused on a maximum size area for micro units. For what is the smallest size, the building code does have a lot of direction as to what the minimum could be set at. That may not factor in some of the maybe livability aspects that you might be looking to address, Councilmember Barksdale, through that comment, but that is something, if the council wishes, we can have the Planning Commission take a look at too, what a minimum might be. And then for the incentive for affordable, we will be looking at that as well. The multifamily tax exemption program does offer units that are less than 400 square feet to take advantage of that program. The AMI level is at a deeper affordability, so that's something that the council has made some policy decision on previously, and kind of holding it to a higher standard, as it were, for providing affordable
What
units.
AMI would it bring the cost down to if it were to use the MFTE?
I believe it was 45%. I'm not sure, Matthew, if you recall.
Yeah, so the MFTE program requires that if the unit is under 400 square feet, I believe that it meets a 45% AMI threshold.
And they're already low, that's already maybe at 65%? or lower?
It depends. We were looking in different market geographies because there's not a lot to look at in Bellevue. But
So does it layer on to that? If you start at 65% AMI and you use the MFTE, it brings it down even further?
So where we were finding the rents to be for a micro unit, this was looking at some examples that were in the 300 square foot range. The market rate for those were between $900 and $1,500. So that was not having those as income restricted units. And so if you were to have them as MFTE units, then they would be income restricted, and the 45% AMI would be the requirement here in the city.
Okay.
So those would be set down then at 45%.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And I guess just to follow up on the, do we have any idea about how they're performing in other cities over time in terms of, like, are we seeing the cost, like when they start they're low, but then the cost increasing to what was the studio price, and just kind of trying to get a sense of how they're performing?
That is not something that I have knowledge on. I'm not sure if Matthew, if you have any information there that you've found in research, but we can have the Planning Commission look at that too, or we can kind of discuss that through with the Planning Commission and report back to council when we bring back the LUCA.
Just based on sort of preliminary research, it looks like they're sort of following the same market trends as, say, a studio apartment, but they're saying that gap seems to be remaining the same. From what I saw this morning, there's apartments or micro units built in Seattle in 2012 that were renting for about $500 a month. So they seem to be increasing at that same rate as the market. There was an article last week in the Seattle Times where there's a few buildings for sale, and there is a concern with that with a new buyer they may substantially increase the rents. So it's hard to get solid information on exactly what's happening, and there's a lot of flux, it seems, in the market.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I think it sort of reinforces the need to look into the possibility of having the opportunity to have affordable housing as part of this work. And then, yes, you hit the nail on the head with the question about the livability aspect of size as opposed to just the building code minimum size. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. This has been a great discussion. So you want us to weigh in on the scope. It's on slide 8, and as far as what we're sending to the Planning Commission. And I support that proposed scope. I think that all of the comments from my colleagues that have been made prior to my speaking all fall within those general descriptions. And I do support looking at minimum size, looking at the mix of units, looking at kitchenettes versus full kitchens. I think that looking at how these impact, if it's just going to make studios cost more, or these will just come up to the price of studios. I definitely support looking at the play areas. I think that's something we should be looking at for multifamily housing citywide, because that was an amenity that was really more of a suburban type amenity that doesn't really belong. It may belong in some portions of the city, but it doesn't necessarily belong in our high density growth areas of the city. So I strongly support looking, I know I heard that it wasn't on the slides, but I heard, I think Nick say that the ADA issue, looking at that picture of the unit on slide 5, where there's the loft, it's a ladder, and you're saying retirees are going to live there. I'm thinking, really? You know, my 96-year-old father? No. So I think that making sure that there's anyone in a wheelchair, I mean, it could be a real problem. So making sure that these are ADA accessible, or at least there's some in the building that have that accessibility, I think is really important, because we don't want to if this is a type of housing that is beneficial to people and desirable by people, we don't want to make it only desirable for able-bodied people. So I think we should definitely look at that. I do have a question about the geographic scope on page 9 of the slideshow. The pink areas are the mixed use, and the dotted line area, which looks like someone's intestines,
Can you pull that slide up for us, please?
Sorry, I've been looking.
Just hold on for a second.
Sure.
Let the staff pull up slide 9 on the screen.
Well, it's the one that's listed as that's number 9.
Yeah, it's the next
down.
one.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, yeah. I mean, and the transit areas, which look like someone's intestines, is the, hey, this is what it looks like to me, right? I mean, Bellevue is the body. Look, those are the high-capacity transit corridors. So on the geographic, sorry, I'm tired. Are we only looking at this in places that are both within the dotted lines and pink?
That is a great question and good for us to clarify. The pink areas are proposed to be the geographic scope. So that would include the areas outside of the frequent transit network, which is the 4 trips per hour, and areas within the frequent transit network.
Okay, my personal preference is that it have to be in both areas. Because there are ones like Newport Hills, this will not work there. There's not regular transit there. There's not service. There's not much in the way of services there. Same thing with Lakemont Village. I mean, I just don't think these will work except in the dense growth corridors where we have high capacity transit and mixed use. So my personal preference is that we have the geographic scope be where these two geographic scoping things overlap. Because I think that's where these would be most appropriate. So that's my comment. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that.
Why don't we have the Planning Commission weigh in on that so we can have them assess?
Well, we're giving direction tonight, so that would be my recommendation. So finally, on outreach, I agree with Deputy Mayor about making sure we outreach to people that would be living near these areas. And then looking, because the MFTE at 45% could give a developer multifamily tax exemption credit for what is essentially a market rate unit, because you said the market rate is 40 to 70%. And I think that's fine. I mean, if it keeps it at 45%. But I think that if we see these being developed, when we have some in the pipeline, we should seriously look at using some of the 1590 money to buy down affordability for this type of housing unit, because this is one of the types of housing units that could be very affordable to someone who's just getting into, has the early job, they're just getting started in their career, or they're on a fixed income, and it could be really appropriate to help fund this kind of housing. So I know that's 27 steps down the road, but I always am looking ahead. So that's not for the Planning Commission, that's for staff's ears. But I think that we need to be focused as housing projects of all types come on board at looking at where we could potentially use some of that money to get deeper affordability at a cheaper price. So anyway, that being said, I'm all for moving this forward, and but would like to see the geographic scope appropriately scoped. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Well, good conversation. What I'm going to say probably would outdate me. I've been here since 1950s, and I've lived in Seattle most of my time. And what you're describing actually is already in Seattle. So I think I kind of voiced Councilmember Zhang's question. What does the city's code do to prevent this kind of stuff from happening? To me, I think, two examples I want to mention to you. One is at University District. There are rooming houses for students. There are rooming houses anywhere can go from four units for 4 students to 20 students to 40 students. It's almost like a dormitory. Each student has a rooming house, and they have common utilities, common kitchen, common laundry, common shower, bath, and so on. And they pay a lot less, less than the dormitory because it's not run by university. So the amenity is not as good. It's all over University District. But because of the lack of space, and there's a lot more money made by building apartments, So people make more money building apartments, selling them, renting them for more money, a lot more amenities. But it's still there. So I don't know how they build this or what kind of code do they use.
Do you want to talk about the difference between a
That
boarding
allow them
house
to do that.
and micro-housing?
I'm not done yet. Yeah.
I know.
Still have one more to go.
Okay.
While you're looking, you must think about the other one. They also have what they call housekeeping units. It's very similar to a studio apartment, very much so. They have one room, basically, sleeping room, a sleeping area, and they have a kitchen area, and then there's a separate bathroom, with bathtub, with everything. And it's 300 square feet. 300 square feet. And people can live, or one person can live there, graduate student, one student, or even a couple can live there. Sometimes they can have a little kid with them, So it depends on how they maximize. Councilmember Zhang mentioned where, we live in Hong Kong. We have units no more than 300, 400 square feet. And you put a family of 5 people living there. So what happened? I mean, this exists. I'm not just saying that these are our ideal of what people need to live in. I'm just curious. Seattle can do that. So I'm not sure what's our land use code that would prevent these things from done. Obviously, they have to be in multifamily zone, a zone that allows them to do that. And I know I've been to these units with complete kitchen, bathroom. They have parking as well. They have parking spaces. And they have a central court. People can actually utilize central court. So the people who live there, they get together. They have...
Councilmember Lee?
So anyway, what I'm trying to say is these things are good, but I think we need to, if we don't know about them, we need to find out more about it and see how we can do
You want
that.
to change the scope of what we're sending to the Planning Commission? Is that what you're saying?
No.
We're talking about micro-housing tonight.
I don't know what micro-housing, that's what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Can you
If this is
explain the
micro-housing, this is what I
difference
want to talk about. If they send to the Planning Commission without looking at this, and I'm saying, well, we're missing something. So we're talking about size, we're talking about all other things. And I believe it exists in Seattle. I don't know whether...
Okay, we heard your question.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
So let them answer the question.
Councilmember Lee, you're correct. Seattle has kind of a longer history, perhaps, with some of these different housing types, including those housing types that have more communal living type arrangements. Our land use code does allow for those housing types to occur in the city, communal living, that is. So rooming houses, congregate care, group quarters, dormitories, those types of things are allowed in the city, but they are perhaps something that aren't as well utilized. So that was to Councilmember Zahn's question and direction for us as the Planning Commission begins reviewing this. What are some ways that we could perhaps allow for a kitchenette rather than a full kitchen, or looking at different alternatives to how you arrange other kind of spaces for residents to share within the unit. So that is something that we heard and do anticipate the Planning Commission then taking a look at as we move that through the process. And then micro apartments, just to get at the definition. So we were really looking at this as akin or essentially a very small studio apartment. Or a loft apartment, so it would have, it would be self-contained. It would include its own kitchen, its own bathroom, and it would really just differ from a traditional apartment by the imposition of a size limit. So that would be the key distinction between a micro apartment and a traditional studio apartment, as we were kind of putting some definition around this tonight.
Can I ask a question? Does that mean that our current zoning code doesn't allow certain unit of apartment of a certain size? If it's a smaller certain size, we won't allow them?
So our land use code does allow for micro apartments.
You got it.
What the aim of this land use code amendment would be is to remove barriers to the construction of micro apartments, because while the code does allow for these housing types to be built in the city, we're not seeing a lot of them built in the city due to some of the restrictions that we have in place.
I guess maybe
minimum
that's what
parking.
Councilmember Zhang was asking. What are the restrictions? I want to know what are the restrictions. So maybe we don't need to come up with a whole bunch of stuff. We just have to remove restrictions. It's done. We don't need to look at new areas. I assume it's going to be in multifamily zone area, not in single-family residences. No different than Seattle and other places, right?
It's right there on the slide in front of you.
Yeah, the geographic scope would be focused on our mixed-use areas,
Right.
proximate to transit jobs
Right.
and services.
Right. No single-family residence.
No.
That's
Multifamily.
correct.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
correct.
So what other restrictions are there? Just size? We got to figure that out. So if you can let us know, then I would be interested to know. I think Planning Commission should know that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot more to say. It's been a really good conversation, even for one that we were just kind of briefly hitting the thing. But I think there are probably a dozen different ways of having housing and all. And I just saw something on a video about, and not just in other countries, but here, younger people, they like something that's 400 square feet, and it suits all their needs. So we're not really talking about that. We're talking about a certain type of apartments, micro apartments, that a lot of people want. They want to have their own bathroom, they have their own kitchen, and their bedrooms, and those kind of things. And there are a lot of ways we can look at it, and we could go off and look at these other things as well. But we're focusing right now on micro apartments and that kind of configuration. It's interesting that, we're talking about Seattle, and yes, my daughter had an apartment in Ballard that was on a major street, and it was a 1920s apartment. Some of the units, the one she had, was what we're talking about. It's a little bit bigger, but it had a one-room bed right here, and you had a little kitchen, little, on one side, and then there was the closets and bathroom on the other side, and same thing. And and you could have had two people in there, and you could have two people and a kid in there, but it's smaller. And yes, we have them. We're not reinventing, or not inventing something. We're reusing or looking at something different. And again, the good news is that we already have this pathway to do it in the code. So what we're looking at is how do we utilize that? How do we change it? How do we put it together? And the things that Councilmember Robertson was talking about is we look at those little elements. What do we want to put in there or not? So I think the program is excellent, something we need. I think you really laid it out well. The questions and comments tonight are very helpful. This would be something I think the Planning Commission can really tackle. And the good news is there is a lot of information out there. We're not reinventing something. We're repositioning it or looking at it differently. So I'm really pleased with it, ready to go forward to the Planning Commission. And I think it's going to end up with us really meeting a big need. And obviously, you're going to come back and say, we run into this little question here, and maybe we want to look at it a different way, and we can have those conversations. But I'm really excited about it and ready for it to go forward. And I think we have a very good Planning Commission, a very good staff, and a good council. So we're all ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, so I just have a little bit to add to this. I lived in micro-housing in Hollywood when I was an intern. And so I loved it. I thought it was great, and it allowed me to live somewhere I wouldn't have been able to live otherwise, allowed me to live close to work. So I'm very excited to be moving this forward to the Planning Commission. I appreciate the comments tonight. I agree with almost everything, and I appreciate Councilmember Robertson bringing out the ADA part of it. Totally agree with that. But I had two questions. I do want to ask the Planning Commission to see how we might get down to 30% AMI, but I'm not want to limit it to $15.90 because I think we could do vouchers with that as well. So I'd like to look into just the different ways that we could get down to 30% AMI on some of these. And is there a limit to how many people can live in a certain amount of space?
Yes, the building code does have some rules around occupancy.
Okay. So I'd like to look into the pros and cons of one person versus two people units and what the size differential would be. So that's it for my comments. So the one thing I would like is, as opposed to what we've heard from Councilmember Robertson, I'd like the Planning Commission to look at the mixed-use land use districts and the high-frequency transit half-mile radius and make the recommendation to us and have us weigh in on what we'd like to see. But that's just me. You've heard you. So we need to hear the majority of the council on that one. But what I do hear is looking at having the Planning Commission look at efficiency versus micro-housing units, asking developers and stakeholders which model they think is more feasible, studying the parking impacts of having this kind of housing, looking into whether we should have a minimum size, looking into whether we should have minimum or amount of people. I guess, the pros and cons is one versus two people. We talked about the AMI. Can we incentivize affordable housing and how we might do that? Can micro-housing be mixed into regular size apartments, developments? Should we require some or all ADA accessible? Where should we locate within the geographic scope, which is what I wanted to ask the Planning Commission. Any comments, pro or con, on having Planning Commission directing them as to what district we want them to look at or have them come back with a recommendation? Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Councilmember Robertson, I believe that the locations are important.
Okay. What about you, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I also agree.
Okay. Councilmember Stokes.
I think we ought to keep an open mind and look at it at this point. We don't want to preclude something that we may look at and figure out a different way to use it.
Okay. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I want to provide this feedback to the Planning Commission, and so that they actually, as they consider all of these elements, actually come back with the best recommendation.
So you agree with Councilmember Robertson that you want to give them a scope of where they should be looking to put these versus the map that's in front of us on slide?
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay.
I think that we should be giving them this map, and as they then consider all of the elements, they might come back and say, actually, we might want to shift the map a bit, but I don't know that I would today arbitrarily limit beyond what's already on the map.
Councilmember Barksdale, you can be the tiebreaker.
Have the Planning Commission return with a recommendation based on
Okay.
this map.
All right, so we'll provide them this map and ask them to bring back a recommendation. We can always weigh in on their recommendation. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good with that. It would be good for the Planning Commission to know that what the council was thinking, though, that the council, was looking at the map and weren't sure whether it should be an overlap, the council was not uniform on that. And I can help with that as liaison. Just that we want them to study it, but that there was some concern on council about allowing micro-housing in mixed use outside the high-capacity area. I think that's fair.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move to direct staff to initiate a land use code amendment to enable and encourage micro apartments.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, and that passes. Does anybody need a break, or should we plow on through? Plow on through, okay. We'll do that. Oh, I think we're taking a break. Okay, all right. Deputy City Manager, would you like to introduce the next study session item?
The last item on the agenda tonight is the third installment of the budget presentations for this fall. Previous presentations have focused on the operating budget and the capital investment plan, as well as new investments to meet challenges of a growing urbanizing city. And tonight, Utilities is here to present their proposed 2023-2024 budget and rates, and the capital development plan, or capital improvement plan. Every biennium, the Utilities Department updates our utility rates to incorporate regional and local costs to fund operational and capital needs to continue reliable and high-quality service delivery to its customers. So tonight, we have Nav Otal, Director of the Utilities Department, Vanya Nazevic from the Environmental Services Commission, the Chair of the Environmental Services Commission, and Tony Call is also, I believe, in the audience to answer questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Nav.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and council members. I was like, was it me, or I hadn't even said anything and people started leaving.
You are remote.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity to present utilities budget and rates for your consideration. This is an informational, I knew I was going to forget something. Oops. There we go. Oh, then it goes really fast. So this is an informational briefing. We're seeking your feedback on utilities budget and rates. The agenda tonight is, I'll start with a quick recap of where we are in the city's budget process before presenting the utilities budget. After that, Ms. Vanya Nazevic, Chair of Environmental Services Commission, will present the Commission's recommendation. So here is the budget milestones calendar. The next public hearing is scheduled for November 7th, and tentative budget adoption is scheduled for November 21st. Here are the planned study sessions on the budget this month. We are today going to be reviewing the utilities budget and rates, and on the 24th, there's Development Services rates, Human Services Commission, and CDBG, Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and Equity, Diversity, and Access. These are actions Council will take to adopt the budget on October 24th. When Tony comes back, she will go through this in more detail. So next, we're going to move to review the utilities proposed budget. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce the utilities leadership team. With me in the audience is Lucy Liu, Deputy Director, Joe Harbour, Assistant Director over Field Operations, Linda DeBolt, Assistant Director over Engineering, and Andy Baker, Fiscal Manager for Utilities. Absent today is Uma Singh, Acting Assistant Director over Resource Management and Customer Service. This team has worked very hard to create a responsible and responsive budget for your consideration. Next, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the utilities before we move into the details of the budget. So we provide 4 lines of business: drinking water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste management. We contract with the Public Services for solid waste services. The services we provide are essential to our communities' health and safety. They impact the quality of our neighborhoods and the health of the natural environment, our streams, lakes, and wetlands. They're also vital to the economic growth and prosperity of our city. Our mission is to provide continuity of these services 24/7, 365 days a year, now and in the future. So our services are largely out of sight and out of mind, and unless there is a disruption of services. Success for us is often measured by the absence of failures. Utilities operates as enterprise funds within the city structure. What that means is that by law, each utility is a self-sustaining standalone business and has to be financially self-supporting. What that also means is that we don't get any tax revenues. The rates paid by the customers are our primary source of funding. Utilities is also very capital intensive with lots of infrastructure to maintain. Furthermore, our services are not scalable because our infrastructure has to be in place before growth happens. And we have to be ready to meet the peak demands whenever they occur. For these reasons, we have a very long-range planning horizon because we provide essential services that the community relies on. And as a utility, we have a number of challenges. First and foremost is that about half of our budget is to pay for external costs, such as for water supply and wastewater treatment costs. These costs are out of our direct control and are non-discretionary. Another challenge is aging infrastructure. We own and operate over $3.5 billion of infrastructure that's well past its half-life. Maintaining and rehabilitating this infrastructure has budgetary impacts. Also, utilities is a highly regulated industry, and the cost to comply with the regulations is a key budget challenge for us. In the face of unprecedented growth, we need to make sure utility infrastructure is in place to support the city's economic prosperity. And of course, like everyone right now, we are impacted by extraordinary inflation. Despite these challenges, Bellevue's rates are competitive with our neighbors. This chart compares Bellevue's total monthly bill for water, sewer, and storm to our neighbors. And as you can see, Bellevue is in the middle of the pack. I will go into more detail later in the presentation on different rate drivers that affect utility bills. The budget before you responds to council priorities by providing essential services that are critical to economic development in Bellevue and by taking care of both the built and natural environment. Being good stewards of financial resources, leveraging innovative technology, and sustainability of utility services for the community are very important to us and are a hallmark of a high-performance government. Utilities also offers a number of programs to help our most vulnerable customers, thus contributing to achieving human potential. The utilities budget is based on policies adopted by council. These policies are critical to ensure continuity of utility services. These policies direct us to set rates to fund full cost of providing utility services now and in the future. Wholesale costs from regional providers are passed through to customers so that these costs do not hamper our ability to provide services to Bellevue residents. We set predictive, gradual, and uniform rates. For this reason, we do rate forecasts not for 2 years or even 7 years, but for 75 years. Utilities also has a long-range capital investment policy that ensures that costs are not deferred to future generations. So this finally is the utilities proposed budget, just under $380 million. And this funding is necessary for the 2 years to pay for both operating and capital needs. And we sort of think of our budget in two buckets. One is the external drivers, which is on the right-hand side of this chart and these are bills that we pay to others. This includes wholesale payments to Cascade for water supply and to King County for wastewater treatment. Together, these wholesale costs make up more than 35% of our budget. And as an enterprise, we also pay taxes and for support services for other city departments such as HR, IT, and finance. These costs make up about 15% of our budget. So together, these external costs, shown in yellow and orange or gold, make up about half of our budget and are largely outside our direct control. On the left side of this pie chart are what we call internal drivers. Locally, our single largest expense category is capital investments. This investment is necessary to take care of our aging infrastructure so that we can provide consistent services. About a third of our budget goes to paying for these investments. The smallest portion of the local expense category is is for local operations. That is to pay for all the services that you see listed there, includes personnel costs, supplies, professional services, everything that it takes to run the utilities department. And from this chart, as you can see, locally, CIP is the main focus of our investments. And so for that reason, I would like to go into a little bit more detail on the CIP. Our 7-year CIP is about $318 million. And as you know, the utilities infrastructure is aging and increased investments are necessary and inevitable. The CIP is largely focused on renewal and replacement of this aging infrastructure. As you can see, about $262 million. We have a strategic asset management program to prioritize infrastructure investments for the optimum time. Not too soon and not too late. The goal is to minimize costs and maintain service delivery to the community. In addition to aging infrastructure, we have investments to prepare to preserve the natural environment. I think we have a new commissioner that will be joining us soon.
Leading by example for the future.
Come on up. You can sit with us.
Yeah, please do. You can sit in the seat right there.
Come on.
Do you want to say? She's
Your
used
choice.
to
Like, your
dinners
choice.
from the meetings that are monthly meetings, so she's asking for food.
Yeah, no, we are always recruiting for new commissioners.
Yes, we are.
Yes, come on over. So, in addition to the aging infrastructure, we have environmental preservation of our natural environment, and we are always investing in operational efficiencies to ensure that the infrastructure is in place to accommodate Bellevue's growth. To leverage cost efficiencies and to minimize disruptions to the community, the CIP is developed in close coordination with other departments and agencies, such as Bellevue's Transportation Department and WashDOT. So this gives you, highlights some of the key projects in the proposed CIP. As I mentioned, majority of our investments are for aging infrastructure. So each of the 3 utilities is in a different stage of system replacement. Water is in active replacement right now. For this reason, we have more investments in water, including replacing water mains, rehabilitating water reservoirs, and pump stations. In sewer and storm, we're just beginning to replace systems. Under environmental preservation, we have investments for preventing flooding and to preserve our waterways and support fish passage. We are also well positioned to support growth by making investments well ahead of development. Nearly every CIP has projects to support growth. In the current CIP, we have a project to add water storage for downtown Wilburton and Spring District. In previous years, we've added new water inlet station in the same area and new water facilities in Spring District. Here is our 6-year rate forecast, including the rates proposed for the next 2 years. The proposed total rate increase for all 3 utilities, water, sewer, and storm, is 6.7% in 2023 and 5.8% in 2024. Increases in wholesale costs for water supply and wastewater treatment are driving 1/3 of these rate increases over the next 2 years. And these regional costs are expected to increase in the future. Locally, you can expect, as just a rule of thumb, is roughly 4% local rate increase, 2% for capital program, 1% for taxes and support costs, and 1% for running the utility. So this is a little bit more detail on the typical residential bill and what's the impact to that typical residential bill by different rate drivers. I'm going to focus on 2023 bill. Our current typical residential bill for the 3 utilities is about $197 per month. The cost we paid to Cascade for water supply in King County wastewater treatment will add $4.71 to the customer bill in 2023. Locally, investment in capital infrastructure will add $4.82. payments for taxes and support services will add another $2.58. The smallest portion, funding our local operations, will add $1.07. The total increase for 23 monthly bill will be $13.18. In 2024, we have the same rate drivers. The actual dollar split may vary a little bit. So going back to how do our rates stack up? Obviously, we develop our budget and rates based on what are the needs of the utility to sustain services. But we are always mindful of how our rates compare to our neighbors. And in doing this comparison, we researched the reasons for some of these cities with lower rates. Our findings are that there are two main reasons behind rate differences. One is the source of water supply. Both Issaquah and Redmond, that have rates lower than Bellevue in some of these categories, have their own water supply source. Kirkland, on the other hand, is very similar to Bellevue in that they buy all their water from Cascade. The second factor is the amount of investment in infrastructure. Bellevue is actively replacing aged-out infrastructure, and we have a long-range capital funding plan for future replacement needs. As utility systems age, many agencies across the country will have to do double-digit rate increases to pay for infrastructure investments. This will not happen in Bellevue because we are one of the few cities, in the nation, really, that's putting money aside for infrastructure renewal and replacement and actively replacing aged-out systems. So Bellevue's rates are competitive now, and they will be even more competitive in the future because of our long-range capital funding strategy. We are very mindful of the members in our community who may be in disadvantaged financial conditions, and utility bills may be a hardship for them. And we have several programs to assist them. We have an emergency assistance program that provides bill relief for customers facing temporary financial shocks such as job loss. This program waives up to 4 months of basic utility bill for qualified customers. We also have ongoing utility rate relief programs to serve our low-income seniors and permanently disabled residents. This program provides a 70% discount on utility bills. About 1,100 participants take advantage of these programs. And we spend over $1 million per year to help these customers. In addition to these, the city also has a refund to low-income households for a portion of the utility tax paid. So in total, a typical participant receives cost savings of about $1,100 per year. Suspense. Oh, oops. This is, okay. So in addition to the budget before you, the Environmental Services Commission also reviewed and deliberated on 2 policy issues. We're not asking for policy direction on these today because they will not be implemented until 2024. So we will be bringing these issues to you early next year. These issues are, first topic is transitioning to billing our customers on a monthly basis. Right now, we bill every 2 months, and there is a lot of industry thoughts on going to monthly billing. So we will be bringing that to you. The second is how best to recover credit card costs that are increasing the processing costs. So again, we're not looking for any direction from you other than to let you know that the commission did look at these issues, and we will be bringing their thoughts on those topics later on in the or actually early next year. So that concludes my presentation on utility budget. I'm happy to answer any questions you have now, right now, before I turn it over to the chair.
Go ahead.
Oh, no question.
Oh, well.
They're all for you.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking to Councilmember Robertson about something. You want us to go through questions? Okay. So let's start with Councilmember Lee, since he is the liaison to the Environmental Services Commission.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank the Environmental Service Commission, especially Chair Vana and her young daughter and the future commission for their hard work and diligence in reviewing the utility budget and rates. The commission had very robust deliberations throughout the year in scrutinizing the proposed budget and rates. I've worked closely with the commission to make sure the proposed budget allows Bellevue to continue to deliver reliable, high-quality utility services, not just now, but into the future. Rate increases are never easy, but they are necessary to continue to provide these essential services our customers have enjoyed. This is a responsive budget, and I support it. To keep the rates as low as possible, I've also worked with staff on efforts to pursue external funding to mitigate rate pressures. I appreciate staff's continued persistence to pursue grant funds for utility functions. At this time, I just want to take this opportunity to make one point. As you notice in the rates discussion, 50% we can control, 50% it's out of our control, it's passed through. And we notice that the rate increase, a lot of it increase will come from our external sources. So we need to pay attention. How can we work on the regional basis to influence the external rate increase, which is clean water and wastewater, which is under other jurisdictions. So let's pay more attention to that, because our department, utility, is doing a great job, but we don't have control or limited control on the other side until we pay some more attention to it. So thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks to the staff and to the commissions. Thank you.
At this point, then,
Go ahead.
shall I turn it over to Vanya for your
And then we
presentation?
do questions?
Sure, that's what I thought.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. I'm Vanya Knežević, Chair of the Environmental Services Commission. A key responsibility for the commission is to advise City Council on utilities budget and rates. In this role, the commission represents the interest of utility ratepayers and takes the responsibility assigned by council very seriously. Over the last 9 months, the commission reviewed the budget in detail over 9 meetings. The commission has closely scrutinized the proposed utilities operating and capital budgets and the rate increases to implement the budgets. The commission received public input on the proposed utilities CIP through an online open house. The commission also held a public hearing to gather public comments on the proposed utilities budget and rates. This work formed the basis for the commission's recommendation. Based on our budget review, the commission unanimously recommends the proposed utilities operating and capital budgets and rates. Commissioners, as Bellevue ratepayers, are sensitive to the impact of rate increases to customers. However, external costs, including wholesale costs, taxes, and support services costs, are increasing. These costs are not within the Utilities Department's control and will require rate increases. The budget also includes prudent investments in infrastructure based on utility asset management program and long-range infrastructure funding strategy. The commission did look at the possibility of delaying rate increases for infrastructure renewal and replacement funding. Unfortunately, the negative financial impact over the future years was greater than the minimal benefit we would see in the rates for this budget. So the commission recommended not to defer R&R. The proposed budget and rates represent a responsible and lean budget designed to enable the city to continue to provide high-quality services. The commission appreciates staff's stewardship of ratepayers' dollars, focus on customer impacts, and continued focus on operational efficiencies. On behalf of the commission, we appreciate the opportunity to analyze the utilities budget and provide a recommendation to the council.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councilmember Barksdale, would you like have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few comments first. Thanks for the presentation from NOV and then the Environmental Services Commission. Just wanted to make a few comments here. Just as being on the board and on the Finance and Management Committee, that been advocating to make sure that the cost increases and issues related to the allocation of member charges are equitable for all Cascade members, and of course that includes Bellevue. If you may recall, when we got the update or when we had the budget discussion with Cascade, there was question about some of the member charges, the increase that we had, and so as a result of that, I've asked for Cascade to conduct a regular detailed review of information. I got a pop-up. Regular review of information used to determine the member charge allocation so that we can make corrections or adjustments more sooner rather than later. And finally, just wanted to note that Cascade has been in discussion with Seattle about a contract extension, and my understanding was that those negotiations are going well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn, followed by Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. You know, I always appreciate the thoughtful nature of our utilities and looking at making sure that our rates include the R&R. With that said, you know, especially with our communities that are struggling, the utility costs can be high in terms of being able to pay. My question is, I know on the slide you showed the 2.4 million of utility relief support for the different categories of support we're helping, the 4-month emergency, the senior disabled, and the low income housing. As we look at the needs in our community, are we seeing a need to increase that budget, or is the increase showing up more in the ARPA disbursement that we are focused on? I'm just curious about, as we look at the needs moving forward, whether the funding is going to be sufficient. Thanks.
I think the funding is sufficient for the program as it exists. And what we are doing is focusing our efforts on outreach. And we work with a lot of the social service agencies in the community, including our own human services, to get the word out so that people are actually take advantage of these programs. And we go out in the community. We go to to mini city hall. We go to senior apartments, and we do a number of things such as automatic renewal and making it easier for people to reapply. So I don't think that we need more additional funding. The way I look at it is, what we need to do is increase our outreach efforts and find really make the market the program a little bit more. For whatever reason, we have not seen much growth in our program. We have reached out and gotten some funding for our customers who have gotten overdue bills. So we've gotten state funding, about $100,000, to help our customers, and that program is managed by HopeLink, but we got that funding so that our customers could use that for paying overdue bills.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to understand. It seems like if we've got more community that need rental assistance, that the utility assistance would also be needed. So I would like to better understand what additional outreach might be needed and make sure that, especially for the funds that are already available, I'm just a little surprised as you are that we're not seeing that increase in need, because it seems like housing, utilities, and food go hand in hand, and we're certainly seeing both in the rental and the food insecurity that those needs have gone up significantly.
Sure. And actually, we do reach out to our partners, partner social agencies. And we are one of the very few cities, utilities, that provide discount or rebate to multifamily. So for folks that actually get their utility bill from us, we discount the bill. For those that live in apartments, they can apply, and we will then send them a rebate check at the end of the year. So like I said, what we want to focus on is not putting more money in the budget, but actually maximizing the use of the money we already have.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add
Okay.
something?
Yes, please.
Just because I'm passionate about multifamily units, and I think that's where we run into an issue where we need to do more education to multifamily units. Renters mostly are renting from those units versus residential, and that's what we've been talking the last couple of meetings to make those efforts. Because we were all surprised how little of utilization there is for this benefit, especially during the COVID.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember those conversations when I was a liaison still that seemed to be lower, and that was pre-COVID, but even then, it didn't seem as many folks were taking advantage of these programs as we might expect. So first of all, thank you so much for the great presentation, Vanya, and the entire Environmental Services Commission. Thank you for bringing your daughter tonight. I love it that you did that, and to show everyone who's watching. It reminds me of when Councilmember Robertson's telling me stories. She used to bring her daughters to meetings all the time as well. So setting a great example. I wanted to ask a couple of quick questions here. So. On slide 16, there is a big jump that I noticed that I wanted you to speak to on the wholesale from 2.3% to 3.2% in 2028. Can you just speak to why we have such a significant jump? I think I might know why, but I would love to hear it from you.
That is King County. King County is, right now, their short-term forecast is about 5.75% rate increase to us, and that will increase to 9% starting in that year. And so that rate increase there is as a result of King County.
Okay, okay. So I'm sure you're looking already in terms of what that potential could look like to utility ratepayers, and this has a significant jump at that time. So that is 2028, so that's a little ways away, but I know you'll keep us apprised of that as we continue down here. And thank you again so much for the emphasis on Bellevue's approach compared to some of the other municipalities. I think that's so important in terms of why our rates are the way they are and the strong reinvestment in our infrastructure year over year over year. I think that pays dividends to our residents. I think it's being very responsible in terms of how we use ratepayer funds to continue to just reinvest. So I really appreciate that. And some of the other costs that are, quite frankly, out of our control in terms of who we purchase the water from and at what rate. So really wanted just to mention that and thank you. And I think further education of the community in terms of how those things, how those rates are set are always really important. And I know this is coming back before us, but thank you for listening to the residents who have called for monthly billing versus bi-monthly. What I've heard is that the biggest reason that they're in favor of that is more predictability in terms of those on a fixed income and managing their money from month to month. It'll be easier for them to do that. But as part of that, I hope that you'll also look at any increases that may be passed on to ratepayers, and because we go from bi-monthly to monthly, and you don't have to speak to that now unless you want to. Then feel free to do so. And then the other thought I just had on the credit card recovery, perhaps something the commission could look at if needed, is that those funds could be put back into the utility bill discount or the tax rebate or marketing dollars to make more residents aware of those programs. Maybe not all, but maybe some would be sufficient. But if that's a way we can further fund those programs if needed, perhaps that's something the commission could take a look at. Thank you.
Sure.
Sure. It's already been a robust conversation amongst the commissioners, probably one of the most robust since I've been in this role for 6 years now. it's been interesting, and I was very surprised how we all had different opinions about what to do with those credit card charges. But I am excited about which way we are leading and how those funds will reflect in rates decrease. Not a lot. It's never enough, but a little bit.
And we will have a robust discussion here in early 23 on both those topics.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you. And thanks for the great presentation and work. I know it's been a lot of work this year. And I also wanted to appreciate Councilmember Barksdale for his comments and service on the Cascade Board for the city. I appreciate you keeping your eye on that on behalf of our ratepayers. So first, before I begin, I wanted to say that I do support Bellevue's philosophy of having a robust reinvestment program in the R&R. I think that's the right thing. It's the responsible thing. Being good stewards of the people's assets and money is really important to me, and I think that that's one of the ways that we do so. But I have to say, looking at slide 16 and projecting out a 60 to 70% over 10-year increase is a pretty hard thing to swallow, especially because, you know, there's people that have a really hard time with funding that. So it would be good if we could do things with our capital budget to help create more water availability and to ultimately drive down the rates in the future. So I see that we are looking at groundwater well project to create more source. Do we have any idea about how much source that may create and what that might do to rates in the future?
So right now, we are pursuing groundwater primarily for emergency supply.
Okay, that's right.
It's more for resiliency. But we do have enough water rights to serve like about half of the winter usage, or just under half. So we are looking at the feasibility of developing those wells. And then if we want to use it as a water source, we really will need to engage with Cascade, because right now they limit the amount of supply that members put into the common pool. But I think that is not an obstacle. That is just a step that needs to be taken. And I will tell you personally, I would like to have some independent supply. It just gives you a little bit of comfort, and especially in cases of emergency, that we have a local supply.
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. I think that's also part of being a good steward, both for just in general overall, but for the emergency basis. I also really support Councilmember Lee's comment about we should try to get more grant funds for some of our projects. I think that would be really great. And then I was looking at one of the ways that we fund projects in addition to rates that go into R&R are the connection fees. And I was looking at the water, sewer, and storm connection fees in Bellevue, which I have to say I've never looked at. I see there's a 2021 update on the website. And in most cities, when, of course, these only come into play when you add new units or new development. In most cities, these are paid up front by the developer. But Bellevue, we have these paid for 10 years by the customer. So I can imagine when someone is buying or moving into a new unit in Bellevue, the surprise, not only are they paying our rates, but they have to pay these add-ons for 10 years. So I don't know if that's something that, this is probably outside the scope of this conversation, but I don't know if that's something that the Environmental Services Commission would consider looking at again, because I suspect when that policy was made in the 90s, we had a very different situation than we have today. And so that's number one. And number two, how often do we update these fees? Because they seem pretty low compared to a lot of other cities. Not saying we want to jack things up, but the people, when we have new developments that are using our system and driving the need to expand our system, I think it's fair to have those projects help cover their share. So rather than putting it on the backs of the people that live here already. So how often do we update the CRCs? And do they actually cover the true fair share of the connection and buying into the system that the ratepayers have been investing in all these years?
So we update those annually.
Okay.
Unless there's not much of a change, in which case we'll do it every 2 budgets, but they're looked at annually.
Okay.
And they do recover the costs for buying into the infrastructure. So some agencies might collect money for projects in the future. What we do is we actually say you're buying into the existing infrastructure. And so I think they do recover the cost. As far as paying upfront or over 10 years, you're right that this is really kind of an artifact of decisions made back then. But you might recall that when we pursued funding for a couple of affordable housing projects, one of the conditions of that was that the customer is able to pay the fees up front. So we have now changed it to say the customer has the opportunity to prepay, like Seattle does for sewer capacity, or you can amortize it over 10 years. But what you bring up is a slightly different idea, and certainly we will take it back and talk to our development services folks about perhaps doing it as a fee up front.
Yeah, I think we should think about it because it's one of those things that a new homeowner might not expect. So I just think it's worth a discussion and look at it. Obviously not to derail this. And I do support the upcoming policy look at credit card recovery and monthly bill pays. I hope that the scope of that work includes allowing people to set up on auto pays as well as online bill pay. Because we've had some ratepayer comments about that, about how difficult it is. And a lot of people just set their bills up and they just auto pay every month or whatever the billing cycle. So will that include that scope?
Yes, it will. And in fact, actually, one of the things we want to do is encourage customers. So we will be doing a lot of outreach to say, here are low-cost ways, low-effort ways for you to pay the bills. So because we really don't want to charge people. What we want to do is prevent these costs from going up, the credit card processing. And there are low-cost options. So we will definitely be doing that, and we'll bring back to you the results of those efforts.
Super. And then I guess just one more quick thing. The utility property at Marymore, that has been, a lot of people want us to use that for cricket. I know that under the law, because it's utility property, we have to get paid fair market value for that. If that transaction does come down, I assume that fair market value will go in to potentially offset rates or pay for R&R. Is that what the expectation is?
So what our policies are for our capital investment is that any one-time monies, sale of property is a good example of one-time monies, go into that fund. So
which one is that, the R&R?
Pardon me?
Which fund?
Whichever fund owns that properties. And in this case, our property adjacent to Marymore is owned by the sewer fund. So the funding from sale of any property from sewer fund will go back into, and rather than lowering rates right then, it goes to fund the R&R, and which means that long-term rates are lower.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. Guess it helps to hit the green. Thank you very much, and pleased to see both of you here and have this discussion. There are a lot of issues in this. First place, I think the plan and the financial program is very good and very well laid in the future. One of the things that is always a puzzle on this, and I know the first thing when I first came on and was the liaison to the utilities, to the Environmental Services Commission, and we went in and saw this chart, and it is absolutely amazing that we are doing this planning out so far along for the utilities. and other cities aren't. And one of the reasons that some of them are lower on the water costs is because of that. And one of these days, they're going to have a big, big bill to pay, and we don't. But one of the things that is we have to keep up with, I'm sure you are, but without getting into any details, but there are seem to be more and more water issues in terms of breaking pipes and things like that. And I know we went from, what was it, 2 years from 5 years to 2 years in replacements at one point. Are we looking at actually increasing the recovery and increasing the replacement of pipe further ahead? Because there's a number of things in the paper, and sometimes we've talked about it, mentioned that we always say that, you know, a lot of these pipes are well over at least half of their lifetime and probably more. And it may be, or you're looking at, and I guess the commission is looking at, is this, are we on the best path for the future, and what happens if there's a real big breakdown at some point and we're not ready on it? I mean, so it's going to cost more, but it's one of those things that, you know, is a long range, and that's one of the great things about the utilities department is it thinks in long range. So I'm just raising the issue. Are you kind of thinking about at some point really going into a very major consideration of where are we now, and particularly with all the new growth coming and changes in the climate and all those other factors in there. Is that something you're working on? I'm sure it is, but just want to confirm.
We are. Our engineering department has been working on it, and that's really the premise of our infrastructure investment is a very robust asset management program. So what we look at is the probability of failure in an asset like a pipe, and then the consequence of failure. So, you know, there are some areas that the consequence might not be so dire, but the pipe right by Overlake Hospital, any failure of that pipe will have dire consequences. So there is a huge prioritization process that happens. And what I can tell you is that we are very comfortable with our current strategy. And we are replacing 5 miles of pipe every year. And that's really quite a bit more than most other jurisdictions do. And that's based on the types of pipe we have. We have some asbestos cement pipe that's what we are getting rid of first. There's a whole science behind when you replace. And the thing is, you're right in that we don't want it to fail, because that will actually end up costing a lot more. But you also don't want to replace it too soon, because then that's really wasting useful life of that asset. So our goal is replace it just in time, not too soon and not too late. And we do look at this, and we look at it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, no, I know, and I'm just you know, things change and all, and just want to make sure. And unfortunately, in the public, they don't quite understand the process, and something breaks this, like, and you get some bad comments. But I just wanted to highlight that. I mean, we're the only one doing that, and one of the big reasons some of the other cities around us rates are lower in getting their water is because of this. And actually, sometimes the cost of their own water is more than what it comes from Cascade. So it's a complex thing, but I think we're on the right path. One of the things I did want to call out, and I know we have some talk, and the only talk about looking at the rates is always concentrated on the water rates. The reality is that of the 5 different rate places where the funding comes from, or the payments come from, is not water. It's the lowest one in terms of the cost to the utility, and it's you know, it's the cost in terms of looking at, and this is a long range thing, but I mean, we talk a lot of times about doing our own water and everything, but again, one of the things we worked on for for a long time, for decades on, and the reason we have it is because it is the best in terms of rate charges and reliability and everything else. And we do have insight and also participation in the decisions made on the water cost. So it's not as if it's just imposed on us. It's part of a process that we have had and the Bellevue has led the charge in a long time for that. So I think we're in really good shape, and I think I really am pleased at what we're doing with the water utility and with the wastewater, and unfortunately, that's the one we can't control. That's the big cost, and then the infrastructure cost and all that. So those are where the ones that really hit the rates that people pay when it comes down to it. But overall, I think it's going forward very well, and I have no problem with this going forward. And I join in with the idea of having people pay monthly, because a lot of times they come and they complain because they have this 2-month bill, and they check with their neighbors who get paid on a monthly basis, and so now Bellevue is charging more. So that'll be a big help, I think,
Thank you.
along the way.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Okay, so this is so painful to me following our affordable housing work, because this just makes housing so much more expensive. And I know it's not the city, it's really the county that's putting the big high cost here. But this is just a significant increase in rates continuously over the next 10 years. I just have a really hard time just sitting down. And I look at other countries, and they have a circular mentality about seeing waste as a resource. And I really hope that the county starts exploring ways to look at waste management that way, because I think, we just can't continue going on like this, and especially when we see good examples from other countries of how they're doing it, because they actually are getting paid with the biofuel sales that they have, that they make out of their waste after they manage it. So I really hope that somehow as a region we adopt that. I appreciate the comments regarding the burden on some of our lower income households. And so I wonder if we partnered with our human services team, and especially with we should have a list of people who have received rental assistance. So I hope we're doing outreach to those households.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're still not getting any?
Well, we have 1,100 participants. It's not like we're not getting any.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good. I didn't hear that number before.
We spent about $2.5 million over the biennium.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a steward of our resources and for making this possible. May I finish? Yeah, I'm going to finish.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I'm not done, Councilmember Lee. Thank you.
As a member.
Conrad, can the mayor finish?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay. I thought you.
Anyway, I just want to thank you, because it's a tough job that you have, and you're keeping us all, solvent by doing this work in advance of catastrophe. So I just appreciate your forward thinking and managing it, our resources, and you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
It's not tough. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I was going to have you say the last word. That's why I jumped in. Thank you. I am on the King County Regional Water Quality Committee, so we have something to do with wastewater. And I think that the mayor made a very, very legitimate, valid point that the biggest cost that we face, our ratepayer face, it's something we cannot directly control. But we need to pay attention to that, and hopefully working as a regional player, because we share the same challenge with all the sun cities, all the suburban cities, 39 cities of us. And so we all have to work through how do we maintain control, how do we look at it. And that's one thing. So if you look at, page 16, which Councilmember Robertson mentioned, you see clearly, especially in the future, we can maintain our rates the best we can. But if we don't somehow influence the rates the King County has, it's going to be out of sight. That's one. Second, I want to mention as a liaison as the city council to the commission, I really appreciate all the conversation at the table. I mean, we spent 40 minutes talking about it. And I'm working with the commission, every month with the staff. And I think this is a real good conversation. I would like to have that kind of unless each of you want to talk to the commission, the staff separately, I hope that, I have your wisdom. Tell me about it, and I can share with the commission members. And I want to thank again the commission working so well, so diligently. Many questions you raised, they already work on it. I mean, as the credit card, the monthly billing, and many other things. So it's important. Thanks for your input, and they know it, and they're listening. And I hope they hear more from you on other topics. And now we can start looking and thinking about it. And then there's a two-way conversation as we move along, not just every 2 years during budget discussion. And, just say, well, you guys do well, go away, and then we find out later, maybe not. So I think this is a real good conversation. I appreciate that. So thank you again. I just want to compliment you guys. I mean, not to say the city council is way behind, but you guys are really right along with it, if not on top of it. So thank you. And you're too shy to say, hey, we already worked on it. But I can be proud to say that some of the things you're already thinking ahead. Thank you.
Chair Nezovic, thank you for coming tonight. Chair Nezovic, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Nav. Great presentation. I just want to remind everybody that our next meeting is canceled. So we're going to be back in session
24th, I think.
October 24th. Perfect. We will see you then. Thank you.
Tony gave me just one small job, which was to just tell you what's happening next, and I messed up on that.
Oh.
I think my slides went away.
Meeting
But-
uncanceled,
No, the 17th
unadjourned.
is
We're back
canceled,
in session.
But on the 24th, you're back here to continue the budget discussions, including development services fees, and a couple of other. So next meeting is, next budget discussion is on October 26th.
24th.
24th, sorry.
Perfect. See you then.
I can.
Meeting adjourned.